Hello and welcome to the program. I am Folashade Ogurinde. Finally, Nigeria's presidential and National Assembly elections have come and gone, but the economic challenges bedeviling the nation are still very much present. From soaring inflation to weakening naira, the country's economic health is in urgent need of resuscitation. So what must the new administration do to ensure that it revamps the failing economy? Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, joins me now. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Now, take us through some of the current economic challenges in Nigeria of today.
Well, the current economic challenges covers a broad spectrum of issues that relates to policy, that relates to infrastructure, that relates to regulation, and that relates to the quality of our institutions, and of course that relates to the macroeconomic environment. At the macroeconomic level, we have been grappling with very serious issues around high inflation. Is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that the economy had faced in the past few years. And the situation has been worsening with very serious implications for the cost of production, for operating costs, for the welfare of the citizens, and for the stability of the social environment. So the inflationary situation is extremely worrisome, and it's one of the biggest challenges that this economy faces. The second major macroeconomic variable that we need to worry about that has been a major challenge is the foreign exchange. We have been grappling with the problem of illiquidity in the foreign exchange market. Many operators cannot easily access foreign exchange. We also have been dealing with the problem of exchange rate depreciation, which is also of a major concern, and this is also one of the factors that have been fueling inflation. The cost of production, cost of raw materials of many companies and industries have gone up dramatically because of the exchange rate depreciation. Then we have the volatility and the uncertainty around the foreign exchange market. We have the issues of round tripping and absence of transparency in the foreign exchange market. So all of those things are very significant macroeconomic challenges that the economy has been facing under this administration. Then, of course, you have the issue of the monetary policy environment, the high cost of credit, for instance. I mean, right now, prime lending rate is as high, it's getting close to 30%. You have challenges of access to credit, especially by small businesses and even large businesses as well, because not many businesses can meet the collateral requirements and some other conditions set out by the banks. For most banks now, apart from the blue chip companies, the collateral requested by banks are what we call bank guarantees. And not many businesses can provide bank guarantees. So credit is an issue. And when we look at credit to private sector as a percentage of GDP, it's just about 12%, which is one of the lowest that you have around the world. So you have a disconnection, so to say, between the financial system and the larger economy. And the deficit in credit is much higher at the level of SMEs and micro enterprises. Then, of course, we have issues of financial sector regulation, which is extremely very tight. As I speak to you, cash reserve ratio is 32.5%, which is one of the highest. And these things have implications for what we call financial intermediation. That is the capacity of the financial system to mobilize funds from the from the surplus end of the economy to the deficit end of the economy. Then you have structural issues around issues of power, issues of transportation, railway system, and all of that. All of those things also are very big issues Even though the current administration has done some work, I mean, they have spent some money and made some investment in the area of road construction and to some extent in the area of the rail system. But the infrastructure deficit is still extremely very high. It is huge. So there's a lot that needs to happen around there's a lot that needs to happen around fixing our infrastructure, because we need to fix infrastructure to be able to make the economy competitive, to be able to reduce cost of production, to be able to sustain businesses, especially in the real sector of the economy. Then, of course, we have issues around regulatory environment. The regulatory environment is extremely very challenging. Some of the regulators are practically intimidating people, coercing the economic players. Many of them are just after the revenue that they can make. And all of these things create an environment that is not conducive for investment. So the regulatory environment itself is not too good. And you have issues of subsidy, which has been creating distortions in the economy. We have serious subsidy problem in the oil and gas sector. There's a lot of distortions in that space as a result of that. A lot of corruption as well. An absence of investment, again, as a result of the subsidy. Then we also have very serious subsidy problems in the foreign exchange market, which manifests in the huge gap between the official exchange rate and the parallel market exchange rate. That again is a major source of distortion in the economy and has also been creating all manner of transparency issues, all manner of corruption and all of that. So those things are not good for investments. Then you have security issues, you have issues of not having a level playing field. Sometimes when you look at the policy environment, you see that it's not quite a level playing field. You have some discriminatory practices around policies, around regulations, which are not very good. Then you have the issue of tax. The tax base is quite narrow, and which puts a lot of pressure on the few companies that are in the tax net. So there's a challenge of not being able to broaden the tax base so that a lot more people can come into the tax net, so that you can have a lot more of what you call fiscal consolidation. So these are some of the challenges. It's a long list, but these are some of the key ones that the economy has been grappling with under this administration.
Now, what key action plan do you expect from the incoming administration as first steps towards economic revitalization?
Well, what I will advise that the incoming administration should do right away is to, even before the swearing in, is to set up an economic transition team, a transition committee on the economy, so that we'll have, even before the inauguration, have some very clear direction and policy thrust, which will derive, of course, from the manifesto of the party. But this time, something which is much more specific, which is much more actionable, and which is something that the administration can roll out within the first 100 days of its inauguration. So we need that kind of team made up of very sound economists, people who have very clear knowledge of what the macroeconomic environment should be, what the policy environment should be, what the regulatory environment should be. So it's going to be a mix of those who are maybe academics, technically competent, and those who also have very clear understanding of the investment environment. So having a transition committee on the economy, I think, is the first major thing which I expect the president-elect to have started to begin to do, even as we speak, so that we have very clear direction, clear pronouncements around policy, so that the administration can send very nice investment-friendly signals to both domestic and foreign investors. So those things are very critical, a very good thing. Secondly, is to ensure that in dealing with some of these economic policies, we also ensure that the appointments are right, round pegs in round holes. We make sure that we ensure that we have the right people in the right places, so that appointments are not particularly on very strategic ministries and institutions. Appointments should not be based on either partisan politics, political affiliation, tribe, ethnic. No, it has to be people who are very competent, who are very technical to handle such ministries, and they must be, and the administration or the president himself should give them that room, that space, that freedom to be able to come up with quality economic policies, quality regulatory framework, and all of that, so that the economy can move forward. Because once you have a very good team to drive the economy, that will drive a lot of confidence. And once you have confidence, you have a growth on investment. If investment is growing, you have GDP growth, you have more jobs. So the quality of economic governance is key. It's very key in delivering outcomes under the new administration.
Now let's talk about the oil and gas sector, because we all know how important this sector is to the economy. What key reforms are you expecting?
The oil and gas sector has been, bastardized. It has been crippled by all manner of bad policies, political interference, bad governance, and all of that. Absence of accountability, absence of level playing field. So if the administration takes on particularly the Petroleum Industry Act, which is an embodiment of all of the reforms that we expect in the oil and gas sector, if the new administration commits to the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act, that will also go a long way. So those two critical reforms, at least, should be very high on the agenda of the administration.
Now, just before I let you go, could you share with us your insight into foreign exchange policy reform, trade, as well as taxation?
There are also need for reforms in the trade policy area, so that we have a much better environment for international trade, less bureaucracy in the trade process, less corruption, removal of all of these customs checkpoints, review of the tariffs to support trade, to make trade more efficient, and making better use of technology in order to ensure that you have better trade facilitation environment. And the Nigeria Customs must be made to commit to issues of trade facilitation, not just focusing on revenue. So trade policy reform is also a very critical one. Then we have power sector reform. The power sector reform that was done some years ago also still have a lot of gaps, a lot of shortcomings. We need to review it and fine-tune it properly to ensure that we're able to attract more investment in the power sector. Because as we speak, we still have very, very huge deficit in terms of power. I'm talking of power demand to power supply. The deficit is extremely high, and it's an opportunity just as it is also a challenge. So in order to attract more investment into that space, we need to reform it and make it a lot more investment friendly. Tariffs needs to be such that can attract a lot more investment in the entire power value chain, and the governance structure of the companies in the sector also needs to be properly reviewed, so that we don't have a situation where the power sector companies are also exploiting consumers. So for instance, issues of metering must be made mandatory for all the power sector players. But more importantly, is to have a reform that will be able to drive more investments in the sector. Then we have issues around the tax. The tax environment needs to be such that the base is broadened so that we can have more revenue. The administration of tax system needs to be a lot more efficient. with very little loopholes. And all those who are not in the tax net, we need a framework that can bring them into the tax net. Because our economy is peculiar, we have almost 50% of the economy in the informal sector. So if you continue to go with the conventional forms of taxation like VAT, like company tax, education tax, you may not get much from that sector. So we need a model, a tax model that will be able to bring a lot more people into the tax net. And that speaks to the need to move away from, direct taxation to indirect taxation. And that is what is even contained in the national tax policy. Then we should have sector-specific policies, and this will require engagement of each sector, because each sector has peculiar challenges that the government needs to address. Whether we are looking at ICT, we are looking at broadcasting, we are looking at the media, industries, agriculture, poultry, pharmaceutical, oil and gas, aviation, insurance, banking. All of them have different challenges. So the new administration should have a framework to engage sector by sector. And the outcomes of that engagement should be brought to the table of the president for proper deliberation, so that there can be appropriate intervention, very quick intervention in all of those sectors, so that this economy can move forward. So those are some of the things I think the administration should do. And all of these things I've outlined, they can be done within the first 100 days, so that we can, put the economy on a very sound footing.
Well, Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, thank you very much, as always, for your time and your contribution. Well, we'll take a breather now, but Money Matters will be back shortly. To stay with us. Welcome back to the program. In the past weeks, more and more Nigerians have been facing increasing hardship, no thanks to the naira scarcity. Against this backdrop, Nigerians have continued to flock to cryptocurrencies to hedge against current inflation and circumvent the various limitations on naira transactions in online payments. Well, this is no surprise, as Nigeria was ranked 11th on the Chainalysis 2022 Global Crypto Adoption Index and 17th on P2P exchange trade volume. But to speak more on this development, Adedeji Adedoyin, Managing Partner, Blue Wave, joins us now. Thank you very much for your time. Now, with the naira scarcity, more and more Nigerians are exploring other digital and electronic means of payment, such as Bitcoin. What's your take on that?
Okay, thank you for having me today. Well, of course, people would naturally look for the easiest way to get things done. And one of the things we have to understand is that crypto is one of those channels that people would explore. So, of course, most people are moving towards digital payments now. And but then I think one key issue that we've had is reliability. How has this digital payments been reliable? So now there are two sides to this thing. The first side is the regular digital banking, which we all use. And then we also have the other side, which is crypto transactions. By and large, crypto transactions seems to be a bit more reliable in terms of we are sure you can transfer your funds, and if you get your wallet ID right and all that, wherever you're sending it to, of course, they will definitely get the money you're sending across. But the one thing we've seen over the weeks is that a lot of our digital banking platforms are not very reliable, which is one of the biggest issues we've had. And I think one of the key things we now need to look at is how do we make that better? Now, for crypto, the problem is we don't have enough platforms yet in the country that allows us to accept crypto payments. Okay, so for example, we have very, very, very few merchants that allow you to even pay in Bitcoin, for example. So I think that's still a challenge. And I think it's also based on the environment that we are in. So in all, it's a good thing that we are all embracing digital payments. And we hope that in the coming months, there will be frameworks in place to even make it more reliable. But for crypto, for now, it's still a bit dicey. And I hope that maybe in the next coming months, we'll definitely see some improvement also in using crypto for daily transactions in Nigeria.
The recent launch of the Send Globally feature by the US-based Bitcoin company Strike in partnership with Nigerian Bitcoin company Bitnob now enables remittances from the US to Africa to happen at lightning speed. Now, what impact will this have on the growth of digital payments in Nigeria?
Well, in my own personal opinion, I don't think there will be any big changes, largely because it's a bit harder for you to convert. Even if you send me Bitcoin, the people you are sending money to, they need the money like yesterday. So even if you are sending it, if you are sending it via Bitcoin, they still need a medium to convert this money into probably naira or dollars. Okay, so for remittances, except maybe if the transfer charges are quite low, then it might be an incentive. But in all, I don't really see it. I don't really see it as a big market, in the sense that there are a lot of remittance companies that allow you to probably just send money into Nigeria in dollars, which is pretty straightforward. So for crypto, except for because a whole lot of people, as much as we talk about crypto, is not still very wide use in the country. It's not very wide use in the country. So even if you send someone, maybe your village, for example, you send them Bitcoin, it's a lot. It's the process for them to get the physical cash is a lot longer than you just sending it to them, maybe in dollars, and they can walk into the bank and pick it up in the bank and just change it and start spending the money. So I think for remittances, it might maybe in the future, if there are easier ways to convert the money from Bitcoin to Naira to dollars, and there's more banking integration, maybe that could take off. But right now, our banking system is not integrated into crypto right now, based on CBN policy. So it's going to be like a longer process, and I don't think most people that are expecting money from abroad would want to go through all that process to convert their money. But of course, it's a welcome development, and I think as we also move forward, we'll see things like this happening. But I think the question would also ask is that how big is the market for some of these things that we are proposing?
Now, we've seen that despite this push, there's still a cloud of regulatory uncertainty from the CBN. Do you see a change in the nearest future?
Well, based on, I will call it body language now, based on body language of financial regulators in Nigeria, I think we are getting to that point where they are trying to create a framework to allow cryptocurrencies to operate within the economy. And a very good example is the adoption of the e-Naira. Even though it has been slow and it has not been as successful as we had hoped for, but then the e-Naira is an offshoot of the cryptocurrency also. So in a way, I think we're already doing that. And I think some of the other agencies aside from CBN have actually expressed interest in creating regulatory frameworks to help cryptocurrency in Nigeria. But I think the bigger issue is what the CBN will do, because ultimately what the banks will do will be dependent on CBN regulatory power. So if CBN says no cryptocurrency trading in the banks, there's nothing really the banks can do. Okay, so one of the things we have to just think about is how then do we create that system in place so that we can allow cryptocurrencies safely within the banking system? Because one of the key things that has been the excuse of the banks and CBN is the illegal use of crypto for money laundering and crime-related things. But I think if we're able to create a framework that puts a bit of KYC in place, That's KYC, like what the banks do. And you can link each crypto account to a specific bank account in Nigeria. Then I think that should solve a whole lot of that. So I'm hoping that I think in the coming, maybe after the elections and maybe towards next year, we should see some positive lights in crypto related regulations in Nigeria.
Well, Adedeji Adedoyi, Managing Partner, Blue Wave, thank you very much for your time and your
You're
contribution.
welcome. Thank you very much.
I need to wrap on the program. Thank you very much for watching and see you again next time. I am Folashade Ogurinde. Bye for now.